The lights were bright, the table sleek, the cameras already rolling. It was billed as a civil discussion on constitutional integrity. But Jasmine Crockett had been in politics long enough to know what that meant. Ambush. The network said it would be a balanced panel. She expected tension. But she didn't expect him. When she walked into the studio and saw Kash Patel seated across the table, perfectly calm, notes in hand, half a grin already forming, she knew this wasn't a conversation. This was a setup. "Joining us tonight," the host said, smiling too wide, "we have Representative Jasmine Crockett and former Trump advisor and legal analyst Mr. Kash Patel. Let's talk about the Constitution." The word Constitution hit the air like a loaded weapon. Jasmine nodded once, calm, collected. She adjusted the mic on her blazer, ready. Kash leaned in. "Look, let's be honest," he said with faux charm. "Most of what's happening in D.C. these days, totally unconstitutional. These investigations, the indictments, the committees, it's all political revenge. The Constitution is clear. Congress can't just act like a court." Jasmine tilted her head. Slight smile. She'd seen this playbook before. "Actually," she replied smoothly, "Article 1, Section 2 says otherwise. Congressional committees have investigative powers, including subpoena authority as part of their legislative function. That's not political revenge. That's called checks and balances." Kash laughed dismissively. "That's not how the founders intended it." And just like that, he said the wrong thing to the wrong person on the wrong platform. Jasmine didn't blink. "The founders also intended for black people like me to count as 3/5 of a person. So maybe let's not build our arguments on what they intended. Let's talk about what the law actually says." The host shifted uncomfortably. A producer in the background froze mid-hand signal. Kash tried to regroup. "Well, I've read the Constitution, probably more recently than most people in Congress." That was it. That was the moment the temperature dropped and the tone changed. Jasmine leaned forward, slow, deliberate, and said, "You may have read it, Mr. Patel, but I teach it with every vote I cast." And suddenly, this wasn't a panel anymore. It was a reckoning. The silence after Jasmine's last words was thick. Even the host, usually quick to redirect, hesitated, as if unsure whether he was moderating a debate or witnessing a demolition. Kash Patel broke the pause with a smirk. "Congresswoman, let's not turn this into a law school lecture." Jasmine looked directly at him, not with hostility, but precision. "Why not? You've been handing out misinformation like flashcards." The audience in the studio, previously passive, shifted forward in their seats. Jasmine reached down, pulled a folded sheet of paper from her jacket pocket, and placed it on the table. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the necessary and proper clause. Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. She didn't look down at the paper again. She had it memorized. "That includes investigations, Mr. Patel, into war, into spending, into abuse of power, including abuse by executive officials, like, say, members of the Trump administration." Kash's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine spoke again, gently. "And let's not forget Article 2, Section 4. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." She leaned back. "You know what that tells me? That Congress not only has the authority, it has the responsibility to investigate when officials abuse their position." Kash looked to the host, but the host was watching Jasmine now, intently. "Your version of the Constitution," she continued, "is one where power flows one way. But the actual Constitution? It builds in friction, on purpose, because democracy doesn't run on faith, it runs on limits." She turned toward the camera now, not as a politician, but as an educator. "The moment you try to strip oversight from Congress is the moment you hand impunity to the executive. And impunity? That's not constitutional. That's authoritarian." The host cleared his throat, but no one moved, because something rare had happened on live television. One person came to argue, the other came with receipts, and Kash Patel, for all his smirks and rehearsed lines, had walked straight into a live constitutional seminar, starring Jasmine Crockett, directed by the Truth. Kash Patel's smile had turned thin. He was losing ground, and he knew it. So he reached for the last trick in the worn-out playbook of insecure men with too much airtime: personal attacks. "You know what's funny, Congresswoman?" he said, leaning in. "You quote the Constitution a lot, but last time I checked, you're not a constitutional scholar. You're a political activist with a law degree." There it was, the jab, the coded insult dressed as a compliment. "You're smart, but not qualified." Jasmine didn't flinch. She let the insult hang in the air for a moment. Then she asked calmly, "Are we comparing resumes now, Mr. Patel? Because if we are, let's open yours." A beat. The host leaned back slightly. "You were the chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense during one of the most chaotic transitions in U.S. history. You were part of a legal team that pushed conspiracy theories about voting machines, then refused to testify under oath. And let's not forget the Inspector General report that cited your mishandling of classified briefings." Now the smile vanished. Jasmine continued, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "So no, I don't have a plaque on a Supreme Court wall, but I didn't build my career around disinformation either." The room tightened. Cameras zoomed in, not by choice, but as if drawn by gravity. "You call me a political activist? Damn right I am. Because when people like you treat truth like it's optional, activism becomes the only honest profession left in the building." Kash blinked, and in that blink, everyone watching saw it: the difference between a rehearsed opinion and a lived conviction. The host cut to commercial, early, but the damage was done. Because in trying to discredit her law degree, Kash Patel had opened a door Jasmine walked straight through, with every document, fact, and memory the system had hoped she wouldn't bring. The commercial break ended with the studio in uneasy silence. When the cameras came back on, Kash Patel was already talking, louder this time, trying to reclaim authority through sheer volume. "The Constitution gives the executive power over national defense. Congress trying to interfere is a threat to national security. That's what no one wants to admit." He turned toward Jasmine with a theatrical shrug. "You can quote all the clauses you want, but in times of war, presidents act. They always have." Jasmine didn't rush. She just adjusted the mic in front of her and spoke evenly, like she had all the time in the world. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Patel. Presidents have acted in times of war, but it's when people like you distort what war means that we lose the republic." Kash tilted his head, confused. Jasmine continued. "January 2021, you helped delay the National Guard deployment by hours. You called it a communications error. But what it really was? A failure of duty dressed in legal language." Now the air went still. "You used the Constitution as a shield for inaction, while a building full of lawmakers and staffers feared for their lives." Kash opened his mouth. Jasmine cut through it. "You say Congress interferes? I say you obstructed. And if that's your idea of constitutional authority, then you're not defending the nation. You're defending chaos." Even the host said nothing. "Let me remind you, Article 1 gives Congress the power to declare war, and Article 2 makes the president the commander-in-chief. But neither clause gives unelected advisors the power to stall troops while citizens bleed." Now Kash was silent. Not silenced, but revealed. Jasmine looked straight into the camera. "The Constitution isn't a toy, it's not a weapon, and it sure as hell isn't a place to hide your failures." And just like that, the debate shifted again, from talking points to accountability. And Kash Patel? He didn't just lose the argument. He lost the illusion that his version of the Constitution was harmless, because Jasmine showed what it actually cost. Kash Patel straightened his posture, voice rising as if volume could cover the cracks in his argument. "Look, I'm not questioning your intelligence, Congresswoman, but I am questioning your priorities. You act like the Constitution is perfect, but you cherry-pick what serves your narrative. And frankly, It doesn't sound very patriotic. The studio tensed. Even the host blinked. But Jasmine? She exhaled softly, then said, "You want to talk about patriotism?" A pause. Then she begins. "My grandfather wore an army uniform in 1964. He couldn't vote in the county he was born in, but he still put on that uniform and saluted a flag that didn't salute him back." Kash shifted. The room grew still. He served a country that told him he was 3/5 of a man, but he still believed in the promise that maybe, just maybe, his granddaughter wouldn't have to fight for her rights in a room like this. Jasmine looks at Kash, not angry, just unshakably certain. "You think patriotism is wearing a flag pin or quoting the pledge? I think it's believing in a country that doesn't believe in you, and fighting for it anyway." She leaned forward, voice low, like a truth too heavy to be loud. "So don't question my love for this country, Mr. Patel. I love it so much. I refuse to lie to it, and I refuse to let you lie in its name." Kash's face flushed, not just with frustration, but recognition, because no soundbite could compete with bloodline, no counterpoint could erase lived truth. And in that moment, Jasmine didn't just reclaim patriotism, she redefined it. The lights above the set felt hotter now, not because of stage temperature, but because truth was burning its way to the surface. Kash Patel sat back, loosening his collar slightly. His tone had dropped, trying to regain composure, but Jasmine had already reached for a folder sitting on the desk in front of her. "Mr. Patel," she began, calm as ever, "you've said on multiple platforms that you believe in strict, literal interpretation of the Constitution. Is that right?" Kash nodded cautiously. "Absolutely, the Constitution should be read as written." Jasmine opened the folder and pulled out 3 printed transcripts, each with highlighted sections. "Then let's read what you said, on record." She held up one. "June 3rd, 2020. You said the president has full authority to direct law enforcement without congressional oversight. That's not what Article 2 says." She lifted another. "August 15th, 2021. You claimed states should be able to override Supreme Court decisions that don't reflect American values. That's literally the opposite of Article 6, the Supremacy Clause." Now the third. "And just last year, you stated that congressional subpoenas were optional, except Article 1 says otherwise. In fact, the Supreme Court upheld that power as binding in McGrain v. Dougherty, 1927. She set the papers down like playing cards, and Kash Patel had just lost the hand. "So either you haven't read the Constitution as thoroughly as you claimed, or you read it the way con men read contracts, looking for loopholes, not laws." The host was silent. The crew stopped moving. Cameras held their frame. Jasmine leaned in, not aggressively, but like a final line being drawn. "You don't believe in the Constitution. You believe in power dressed up like patriotism, and the only reason you invoke the founders is to protect a system they never intended you to abuse." Kash's expression was blank. A man caught not in contradiction, but in repetition, exposed not for being wrong once, but for being consistent in his distortion. That night, the clips went viral. "Either you haven't read the Constitution, or you read it like a con man. Power dressed up like patriotism." People weren't just quoting Jasmine. They were repeating her like doctrine, because in that moment, she wasn't participating in a debate. She was delivering judgment. Kash Patel's voice rose again, not with strength, but with urgency. "Look, this isn't about facts anymore. This is about politics. Congresswoman Crockett represents a far-left agenda that wants to weaponize the Constitution. People like her are tearing the country apart." The studio grew quiet. Even the host looked unsure, as if wondering, was this the strategy now? Blame her for caring too much? Jasmine sat still for a moment. Then she leaned forward, folding her hands in front of her like she wasn't preparing to argue, but to settle a truth once and for all. "You keep saying, people like me. What exactly does that mean, Mr. Patel?" Kash shifted in his chair. She didn't let up. "Because if you mean people who read the Constitution in full, who understand both the structure and the spirit, then yes, you're damn right I'm one of those people. Now her voice carried, not louder, but deeper. You call me radical? Radical is thinking one party should control all three branches of government without question. Radical is undermining voting rights while quoting freedom. Radical is acting like oversight is betrayal, and accountability is revenge. She paused. You know what's not radical? Saying that no one, not a president, not a party, not a legal advisor with a microphone, is above the law. Then came the line. The one that would end up on posters, tweets, and talk shows. I don't serve a party. I serve a document. And that document doesn't spell Republican or Democrat. It spells we the people. Silence. Then applause. Not from the studio audience. There wasn't one. But from the viewers at home, the country watching, because Jasmine had taken a partisan attack and turned it into a national reminder. That night, even conservative legal scholars began quietly saying what no one expected. Crockett's not radical. She's originalist with clarity. And Patel didn't walk into a debate. He walked into a constitutional clinic. The viral clips spread like wildfire. I serve a document, and that document spells we the people. Radical is thinking accountability is revenge. Colleges began replaying Jasmine's statements in constitutional law lectures. High school government teachers changed lesson plans mid-week. Political analysts, even conservative ones, started calling her appearance the most effective live defense of the Constitution in a decade. But Jasmine? She wasn't on a press tour. She was in a public school gymnasium in Houston, speaking directly to students. She held up a pocket constitution and said, "This isn't just a symbol. It's not just something old men quote on TV. It's a promise. And it's up to you to make sure people like me don't have to keep defending it alone." A student asked, "How do we know when someone's lying about it?" Jasmine smiled. "When they only quote the parts that give them power, but never the parts that protect your voice." Meanwhile, in a private studio in Virginia, Kash Patel sat with a different kind of audience. No one. He had agreed to do a post-interview segment with a sympathetic outlet. But the energy was gone. The viral narrative had overtaken the talking points. His team canceled the taping. Even among his political circle, things had shifted. "Maybe lay low," one advisor texted. "She didn't just win the debate. She taught the Constitution while you were trying to spin it." The hashtag #Crockett doctrine began trending. Accountability is not partisanship. You don't have to shout to lead, just tell the truth. We the people means all the people. Jasmine remained calm, grounded, no gloating, no victory dance. This wasn't about destroying anyone, she told a local reporter. It was about defending something they thought we forgot. Political commentators began saying, "Before you believe a public official, ask one thing. Can they pass the Jasmine test? Can they back their claims with law, not just volume? Can they quote the Constitution and mean it for all people, not just their party?" Georgetown Hukuk Fakültesi öğrencileri Crockett kliniklerini başlattılar. Jasmine'in konuşmaları inceleniyor, anayasa maddeleriyle eşleştiriliyor, gerçek anayasal okuma pratiği yapılıyordu. A professor at Yale posted, "Jasmine Crockett did more for civic literacy in one live appearance than most elected officials do in a career." Meanwhile, Kash Patel's inbox stayed quiet. 2 panel appearances? Cancelled. A podcast invitation? Pulled. A think tank sponsorship he quietly counted on? Frozen. Even his allies weren't defending him. They were dodging his name altogether. One staffer to a conservative PIAC whispered, "It's not that he lost. It's that he walked into a fight about the Constitution without realizing people were finally listening to it." Meanwhile, Jasmine was on the ground, not in Washington but in Milwaukee, Jackson, and Detroit, meeting students, organizers, survivors. She didn't campaign, she explained. She didn't quote slogans, she quoted the law. At one rally, she said, "Power doesn't fear anger, it fears education. And the day we stop outsourcing the Constitution to people like Kash Patel, is the day this republic actually begins to work again. That clip hit 10 million views in 48 hours, and in the comment section, she's not asking for power, she's teaching us how to take it back. The auditorium was full, not with media, not with politicians, but with teachers, students, nurses, veterans, single parents, and organizers. They didn't come for a rally, they came for clarity. The screen behind the podium read simply, "We the people, a constitutional reckoning." Jasmine Crockett stepped up to the mic. No teleprompter, no slogans, no entourage, just a pocket constitution in her hand and fire in her voice. Somebody asked me recently, "What gives you the right to speak like this?" She smiled, then answered, "The same thing that gives you the right to listen, this document." She held up the Constitution, not like a relic, but like a receipt of ownership. They say I made Patel look small, but I didn't come to shrink anyone. I came to expand what they hoped you'd never understand. That you don't have to be a judge to know justice. You don't have to be a lawyer to know the law is being twisted. And you don't need permission to call a lie, even if it wears a flag. The crowd was silent, not because they disagreed, but because they were holding something sacred, a shared realization. He lied about the Constitution on live TV, not because he misunderstood it, but because he counted on you never reading it. But what happened next wasn't a clapback. It was a wake-up call. She looked across the crowd and beyond the camera lens. From now on, when someone quotes the Constitution, don't just listen to what they say. Ask who they're quoting it for. Because if it doesn't protect the quietest among us, then it's just power, dressed in parchment. She lowered the mic, but then paused. One last breath. I didn't raise my voice to be heard. I raised it so you'd never doubt yours again. The room stood, not in applause, but in alignment. No chants, no shouting, just people standing, like amendments. And somewhere far away, in a quiet office, Kash Patel closed his laptop. Because for the first time, he realized the one thing he could no longer spin, truth that had found its voice and was never going quiet again. Title: He lied about the Constitution. Jasmine made him regret it on Live TV Legacy, not a debate, a doctrine. Result: one voice sparked a nation of readers. They didn't bring me to that table expecting me to speak. They brought me expecting me to react, to fold, to play along. Pauses, steady breath. But I didn't come with anger. I came with receipts. I came with a document they love to quote and hate to obey. They said I was too bold, that I embarrassed a man on national television. Let me be clear, I didn't embarrass him. He embarrassed himself when he thought no one would challenge him with truth. This isn't about clapping back. This isn't about going viral. This is about what happens when the Constitution is read out loud by someone who remembers who it's supposed to protect. And if that made them uncomfortable, then maybe they should stop hiding behind the founders and start answering to the people. Leans in slightly, tone deepens. Because I'm not here to serve silence. I'm not here to please panels. I'm here to remind them truth is not partisan, and justice doesn't ask for permission.